Hello, welcome back. Another two chapters of the Nowhere Emporium. I think it's just going to be two today. It's just going to be quite a short video, as they're quite short chapters. But the third chapter is quite a long one, and an important chapter, so I don't want to rush into it. So, chapter 28, Reunited. The wings of the surviving magpie flashed in the darkness as Daniel raced through the passageways. His fingers gripped the books of wonder tight. He did not know or care where the bird was leading him, so as long as it was away from Sharp. Everything seemed darker than before. The shadows were deeper and the silence suffocating. Again and again, Daniel thought he saw something, shifting in the gloom. He imagined Sharp posing a statue, detaching from the shadows to make a grab for the book. What now? What could be done to stop that madman? How much time was there to save the Emporium now the fountain was gone? And what could he do about it? Alone? The sound of splashing from around the next corner stopped Daniel dead. Steep steps led to a flooded passageway. The water was waist deep. Shattered diamonds of light sparkled on the dark surface, casting from the lamps lining the walls, some of which were still lit. A lone figure was wading through the water towards him. "Ha ha, Ellie!" He felt such relief that he had actually laughed out loud. He crashed down the stairs, slipping under the surface for a moment, taking an unpleasant gulp of the salty water, which shot out of his nose as he coughed and sputtered. "Ellie, it's me!" Ellie, who had been staring into the water as she waded through, her eyes grew wide. "Daniel," she cried, "I've been looking for you all over since the search party got back. The place is in ruins. I've just come from the hospital. The staff are in a bad way. Caleb told me you rushed off." She paused and stared at Daniel's bloodied face. "What happened to you?" "There's so much to tell you," said Daniel. "I'm pretty sure your father's alive, and he's in the Emporium." Daniel told her about Sharp's idea of using the book to find Silver and how it backfired. I think it was a message," she said. "Your father doesn't want to be found." "But he's alive," said Ellie, hopping on the spot. "Thank you, Daniel. I couldn't stop picturing him dying all alone in some dark corner." She hugged Daniel tight, and then she broke away, looking serious. "He's still ill, though, isn't he? The Emporium's falling apart. He can't hold it all together. So why doesn't he want us to find him?" "It's not us he's hiding from, Ellie," said Daniel. "It's Sharp. You were right about him all along. He's dangerous." Daniel took a deep breath. "He wants to kill your papa." "He what?" "Kill him and steal the Book of Wonders. That's why he's here. He's been chasing Mr. Silver for a long time. He was obsessed with the book. He'll do anything to have it. And the book won't work properly for him unless Mr. Silver hands it over to him or Sharp beats him for it. It's the reason your father makes the Emporium move around so much. He's running away. I think that's why people from the outside can't see you. It's your papa's way of protecting you. I bet it's the reason he won't let you leave the shop too. It's all to keep you safe from Sharp." Ellie's mouth moved wordlessly before she found a voice. "How do you know all of this?" "Sharp told me so himself," said Daniel, and the story began to spill out of him. How the magpies had led him to the fountain, how he'd only just escaped with his life after stealing the book back, and how one of the birds had not been so lucky. Ellie's hand went to her mouth. "He wrecked the fountain, and he did that to you." She pointed to Daniel's swollen lip. He could taste the blood, and the salty water nipped at the wind. "I'm sorry," said Daniel. "I've messed up everything. I should never let him in, and all I ever wanted to do was help. I don't want to lose the Emporium, or Mr. Silver, or you." To his surprise, Ellie smiled a crooked smile. "All that matters now is what we do next. We can still turn things around." Daniel thought for a moment. "If we can get rid of Sharp," he said, "I reckon Mr. Silver will come back." Why didn't Papa just stand up to him in the first place? Daniel knew what Ellie was thinking, that Mr. Silver was a coward. He'd even thought the same himself at first. "I don't think it's as simple as that. Your papa is weak, and all the years of running the Emporium on his own has taken his strength away. I think he knew what was coming. He could sense Sharp getting close, and he knew he wasn't strong enough to fight." "That would explain the unicorn blood," said Ellie. It was desperation, her last attempt to get some sort of strength back so that he could get rid of Sharp. "I think so," said Daniel. Only something went wrong. Ellie stroked the walls of the Emporium. "All these years I was sure he was keeping me in the shop so he wouldn't be lonely. I was always so angry at him. He's been protecting you. It's what they do, mums and dads." "So what do we do?" said Ellie. "How do we get rid of Sharp?" "Everyone's got a weak spot," said Daniel thoughtfully. "We've got to find Sharp's." "But how? It's not like we can go over and have a chat with him, is it? Get his life story, have a nice cup of tea and some Empire biscuits, He's dangerous. Life story. The words echoed in Daniel's ears. He stared at the book and began to flick through the pages, gathering speed as the idea properly formed. He heard Mr. Silver's voice far off on the horizon of his memory from his very last listen. I'm a fan of stories, I'm a collector, and there's no greater story than that of life. The Library of Souls holds on its many shelves the story of everyone who has ever lived and everyone who will ever live. Daniel stopped flipping, and there it was, staring him back at him on the page with all its darkness and possible glory. He flashed Ellie a clever smile. Who says we need to talk to Vindictor Sharp to find out about his past? This is the Nowhere Emporium, Ellie. Follow me. Okay, so they started to work it out. We are going back in time now for chapter 29, and it's called Stolen. Michelle Sharp giggled as she walked around in her arm in arm with Lucian through the Emporium's growing number of corridors. What have you made for me this time? She said. It cannot be more beautiful than that crystal lake. Lucian allowed himself a smile. He had created a new wonder for Michelle every evening since they had met. One door led to a room made entirely of velvet smooth chocolate. Another revealed a trek through the branches of an enormous Christmas tree, and the aromas of roasting goose, spiced mincemeat, and coal dust dancing in the air. It had taken him all evening to create the music mine, a vast cavern dotted with brightly coloured jewels that filled the air with beautiful melodies when they plucked from the walls. Lucian had led her up the staircase to a solitary door. What is it? She asked. Open it and find out, he said. She reached the handle, opened the door, and took a few hesitant steps into the room beyond. It's a garden, she said, barely able to speak through her amazement. She was right, it was a garden, an overgrown wildness of plants and flowers and trees, but every petal of every flower was made of fire. The world inside this impossible room was dark, lit only by the flickering from the flaming plants, blues and greens, reds and yellows and oranges. It's a fire garden, said Lucian. I thought of you when I made it. He blushed as she turned and stared into his grey eyes. It's perfect, she whispered, as she began to wander around the garden. Lucian watched. You can touch the flames if you like. They won't burn. Michelle reached up, touching her fingertips the flaming blossom of a tree. Burning cinders fell to the ground, but her skin did not burn, and she laughed and stared around like a child. I have a surprise for you, Lucian said. Another surprise? He took her arm, led her through the archway of the creeping ivy to a clearing surrounded by apple trees, each apple a ball of soft glowing fire. In the centre of the clearing sat a table loaded with food. Lucian pulled out the chair for Michelle, keeping a keen eye on her as she sat. Is something the matter? He asked. You look a little sad. She shook her head and smiled. How could I be sad in a place like this? She nodded to the feast. May I try something? It looks all so delicious. They began to eat, talking, as they loved to do, about running away together to the desert island and exotic cities where nobody would ever find them. Another drink, said Michelle, as she stood and poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to Lucian. She raised the glass. To you, Lucian, and your wondrous emporium. Lucian clinked his glass against hers and took a long sip of the wine. He knew something was wrong at once. The garden began to spin and blur around him. A distant echoing ring filled his head, and he saw nothing but blurred streaks of fire. He dropped his glass and shattered on the grass, wine spilling like blood. Lucian grasped at the table as the corners of his vision faded to black. The darkness began to close around him. He was falling. The last thing he saw before he hit the floor was Michelle, his broken vision fragmented in her face into many pieces. He reached out for her. She did nothing but watch. Lucian was wakened by a slow, rhythmic pounding in his head. He screwed up his eyes to the surrounding fire plants, grabbing hold of the table, and hoisted himself up. He did not know how long he had been unconscious, and every bit of him ached. The table lay as he remembered. There was a half-finished plate of food, and Michelle's wineglass lay empty beside her plate. Lucian's glass popped and snapped beneath his feet as he stumbled around. Nothing made sense. What had happened? Where was Michelle? The mist in his mind began to thin. A thought struck him. Dread choked him as he reached slowly into his coat pocket to the place he kept the Book of Wonders. His fingers found nothing but material. His pocket was empty. More to the point, someone had emptied it. Michelle was gone, and she had taken the Book of Wonders with her. There you go. That is all we're going to have time for the moment. It was, like I said, a slightly shorter video. The next chapter is called The Library of Souls, so we're actually going to find out a bit more about Vindictus Sharp, but it's quite a long chapter. Yeah, so we'll save that for tomorrow. Until then, I shall see you later.